Okay, so today I want to talk about my birth story. So called I don't know what to call it. How I gave birth. Um, it realistically was not exactly what I wanted it to be, but it's something that I am thankful for today. Um, I was not due until the 4th of July, and I had been to the hospital already 3 times to have labor stopped. They give you this shot in your arm. It makes you feel like you've drank too many Red Bulls. And um, the last time I did that, I think it was about 30 weeks. And when I went into labor, I was 35 weeks. And basically, what happened is Tuesday, the day before I gave birth, which was June 3rd, I had come home from work and I had just moved. And FYI, don't move when you're 35 weeks pregnant. And so everything basically I had was in a box, and I was unpacking my kitchen, washing couch cushions. I basically was in full nesting mode, and I was trying to get everything done so I could pack for my stuff. And I started having contractions while I was doing dishes. And I kind of just ignored them because I kind of got them all the time, and they just were nothing like bothersome. And I sat down with my husband, and he made me some dinner, and they got worse. And I just couldn't ignore them. And finally, about 2 hours later, I decided that we needed to go to the hospital. So we went to the hospital, and they like tried to draw blood, and they tried to draw blood out of right here in like my wrist. I don't know why. Supposedly you have a vein there. I know medical, and I think that's a really rough vein to hit. And the nurse actually blew out my vein, so my whole wrist was like black and blue all the way down my arm, and it was terrible. It hurt so bad. That's the only time I've ever cried getting blood drawn. And they checked my blood pressure, and actually my blood pressure was really high. It was like 150 over 100 or something, and they were really concerned I had preeclampsia because my feet were swollen and it was terrible. Well, let me tell you something else. I don't know if anybody lives in Arizona, but there's this river called the Salt River, and essentially you tube down this river. And I did that 8 months pregnant. I tubed down the river 2 days, 3 days before that, and I was actually sunburned. I had a third-degree sunburn. I had been treating at home, and my legs were bright red. And the nurses kept asking me what was going on with my legs because not only were they swollen, but they were like enormously red. And they kept laughing at me. But they checked me, and I was actually 3 to 4 centimeters dilated with contractions. And they didn't know what they were going to do, so they took blood, and they took urine, and they took all kinds of stuff. They finally ended up just sending me home, and I went home that night, and I decided to get up for work the next morning. After getting, like 3 hours of sleep, I was really sore, and I just decided I was going to go to work. So I work as a medical assistant. At the time, I was working for a trauma surgeons in office setting, like clinic, and I was taking care of patients. And the I was just doing fine. I was starting to feel better as the day went on, but still something didn't feel right. And Brooke was fine. She was moving and kicking, and although she had slowed down quite a bit. And it was around 10:30 in the morning. I just decided I couldn't do it anymore. I wanted to go home. So right before I was going home, I was going to do something for a patient, and my water broke. And I thought I had peed myself, and I went to the bathroom, and I actually went pee, and it was kept coming, so I knew I didn't pee myself. So I went out and I told my boss if my water broke, and they were all trying to convince me to let them drive me to the hospital, and I said no, 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 it's fine, I'll drive myself. So I got in my car and I drove to the hospital, and the whole time I was calling my mom and my grandma and my husband, and it was interesting because I didn't have contractions after my water broke till about an hour later. So I get to the hospital and they admit me, and they're like, oh yeah, your water broke. So they get me in a room, and then my husband got there because he had to close up his shop. And I was there. I was doing great. The only problem was I was 35 weeks, so she's technically considered premature. And they were telling me, she's going to have trouble breathing. She may have to stay in the NICU, all this kinds of crazy stuff. And I was scared. And being it my first time giving birth, I was scared. And so, time went on. I was actually playing games. I was in a great mood. I took some naps. And then finally around, I believe it was 6 o'clock, I decided, and they checked me and I was 6 centimeters. And I decided that after I got woke up out of my nap from a contraction that I wanted to get the epidural. And the nurse came in and then the anesthesiologist came in and they gave me the epidural and it was perfect. The epidural is really funny. It feels like when your legs fall asleep and then you get those little tinglies. That's what your legs feel like. Granted, a lot of people say they can't feel their legs, but I felt mine. I was still able to move mine, although not as much, but I could still lift them up maybe an inch or so. And then they kept having me roll from one side to another every couple hours because I guess it's supposed to, and they put like a peanut ball in between my legs because it's supposed to help with labor. And it did. I progressed essentially to like 7 centimeters. And then my husband had to go check on the shop. And my Nana was like, oh, this is going to take a while. I need to go home and do something real quick. So I was like, okay, fine, whatever. I'll take a nap. Well, the next thing I know, they come in an hour later and they check me and I'm at 9. And I'm like, oh my God, you need to come back. So I finally got them all back. And by the time I got them all back, I was feeling this pressure. And pressure was like uncontrollable. It was, even with the epidural, it was painful. And not like a terrible, terrible pain, it was just painful. Well, at the same time, they also told me that my cervix had not dilated completely, even though I was 10 centimeters. So basically what happened was I had this lip that she kept getting stuck on of my cervix on top and on bottom. And they didn't want me pushing on that because it could bruise or really hurt my cervix. So they made me wait, and I actually started crying. I will admit that I started crying. And an hour later, they had me start pushing, and they wanted to see how I was pushing, and I was like, okay. So I was pushing and pushing, and the nurse was like, you're not getting anywhere. You're not pushing past that lip. And finally, I guess something happened, and I started pushing, and she's like, okay, now we're going to get the doctor. Essentially, I pushed for a total of 20 minutes, and they made me mad. I actually got to the point where I felt like I couldn't do it anymore. I was crying. I was bawling my eyes out. My husband's like, you can do it. He was such a great motivator. He was holding my hand. He was in my ear, kissing me, telling me everything's okay. And that's essentially what I needed. And finally, the doctor upset me, and I guess that's what made me push. And I pushed her, and then right as I kind of looked down to take a breath, I saw her grab scissors, and she cut me. And yeah, and the next thing I know, they pulled my daughter out, and they put her on my belly for maybe 10 to 15 seconds. And she wasn't crying, although she was not a blue or a purple or an abnormal color, she was not crying. And essentially, what I wanted to do was I wanted to do delayed cord clamping, so it prevented jaundice and everything like that. And I wanted my husband to cut the umbilical cord. But with her being premature, that wasn't able to happen. Literally within seconds, her cord was cut and she was taken away from me. My husband was with me, and my grandma went over to see Brooke. And my grandmother was keeping an eye on her, and the next thing I know, I hear my grandmother say, oh my God, she squeaked. My daughter never cried after she was born. She just squeaked, apparently. And apparently what happened, according to my grandmother, they had to stick a tube down her throat and resuscitate her because her lungs did not inflate. Her chest was actually concaved in, and they had to inflate her lungs. After that, I was getting stitched up, and they took her. They took her to the NICU because they needed to watch her lungs. And I made my husband go with, so he and my grandma went with her. And they were stitching me up, and that's actually when I started cursing out the doctor, and the doctor was like, that's what I was waiting for. And by then my epidural had worn off, and it wasn't pleasant. I had to get several stitches. I did not have a bad tear, but I had to get several stitches as well because I had to have a catheter, and apparently the catheter tore a little bit. So after that, my husband came back with my phone, and he had taken pictures. And I got to see her, and she was adorable, and I was so upset. I didn't get to have my golden hour, or so they say. I didn't get to do kangaroo care. I didn't get to do anything really that I was aiming to do in my birth plan. And 2.5 hours later, they were transferring me to my new room. And they actually got a call while they were moving me that my baby could come back and be with me, which they said that most likely was not going to happen. And so when I got to my new room, I got my baby. I got to hold my baby. I cried. My husband cried. He cried when she was born, but he was like so happy to see her, and she was breathing well, and she was alert and everything, and I absolutely loved it. And we spent 2 hours. We spent 2 days at the hospital. She actually had to stay an extra day because she was a preemie, and they kept checking her. They kept doing heel sticks and checking her blood and everything like that. And then they let us go home with her the Saturday after I was released, which was really rough leaving her at the hospital. But now I have a 4-month-old baby, and she's healthy. No residual effects from being born premature. For being born premature, she was 6 pounds 7 ounces and 20 inches long. So they say I would have had a 9-pound baby, and I thank my husband for that. Oh my God. But yeah, I have an amazing child, and although I did not have 100% of the birth plan that I wanted, I still regret not being able to have my husband cut her umbilical cord because I was really looking forward to that. The rest I am completely happy with. I love the nurses. I love the doctor. I love the way I experienced it. And I would never go back to change anything. Maybe I would get her cord cut by him. But, yeah. So, that's my birth story. And that's my beautiful baby. And I hope you enjoy.